Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Crimes, Killers, Cults,
and beer.
And beer.
And sorry I coughed during the intro there. Jesus. I was like,
you're
the worst.
You're forgiven, I guess.
All right. I have the worst luck when it comes to stuff like that. Anyway.
Just two crazy Florida men drinking beer, talking about true crime.
Yeah.
Except today it's three crazy Florida men.
Yes.
Drinking beer and talking about true crime, although one probably doesn't consider himself a Florida man, do you?
No, born and raised in New York City. I'm a transplant of the Florida area.
You could still you could still wear the title.
Yeah.
If you wanted to. So, anyway, that's Todd.
And that's Bill.
And that's our good friend Vic Ferrari making his
way over there.
Yeah, making his return visit to our podcast. We had him on for episode 49, and it was a fun episode. And we've got him on back with us today to discuss something that he knows quite a bit about, because we're doing our second Mafia episode. This time we're covering Don Gotti.
Yes. Anyway, Vic, good to see you again, sir. Thank you for coming back.
Guys, thank you so much for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, we appreciate it, brother.
And I just want to say before we get started, this episode and our previous episode on Sammy Gravano are going to overlap. They're going to. They have to. But I'm not gonna try and work around it. I'm just gonna do this one as if the other one didn't exist. So I'm not going to try to be like, okay, well, I'll leave this part out or explain it differently because I said this in the Sammy Gravano episode. Nope, not going to do that. No. That episode does not exist. This is its own standalone episode.
Yes, it is. That's why we brought Vic here, because we get Vic's unique insight into things.
Right. And I don't want to get 1-star reviews that they said the same thing 2 weeks in a row.
Because you know that'll happen.
Yeah. Then we get called monotone again.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Does Vic know about our first hate mail?
Listen, when you put yourself out there, be it an author, a podcaster, and you want the public to watch your content, there's just going to be people that aren't happy with it, or they're contrarian. You know, they like to be contrary, and they're just going to ding you on the reviews. You got to have thick skin and just, you know, it's just the price of the cost of doing business when you put yourself out there.
Oh yeah.
Oh, we gave her a shout out on the next episode that we recorded. She said we were monotone. We're anything but monotone.
I have no idea what she's talking about.
I know, but
anyway.
Yeah, I'm writing a book, Vic.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I started it, and I'm gonna have to try to learn to do that. Dedicate 1 hour a day to it thing that authors talk about, because I've written the first 2 chapters and that's about it.
Do yourself a favor. I mean, I always have advice for first time authors. Try not to write in chronological order, because it'll become overwhelming for you. Pick a part of your book that is enjoyable to write. It's the easiest part of the book. You know that's going to be the focal point, or just something that a story you've told a million times. Start there. And then when you get writer's block, you move around, and then you just tie it together like a Seinfeld episode. Because if you just start with the beginning, the first chapter, the second chapter, and you're not disciplined enough, it's going to be overwhelming and you'll never get it done. Also, you don't have to dedicate an hour, because it almost becomes like homework. So if you say, all right, tomorrow between 3 and 4 o'clock, I have to write. Well, that's great, but now it's like a homework assignment, and just try to get up in the morning. When you're having your coffee, bang out a couple of things. When you have free time, bang out a couple of things. Before you go to bed, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, because when you put less pressure on yourself to write, you'll see that 20 minutes will be the hour, as opposed to you saying between 3 and 4. And then you know, you write a half a page and like, shit, I wrote 150 words. What did I just spend an hour of my life doing?
Right. Okay, that's good advice. I appreciate it.
Yeah, don't make it work, dude. Make it something that you enjoy doing, because that's basically what Vic was saying. Don't make it work.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because then you're forced to write shit that you don't care about.
So I'll just write the climax.
Whatever you know, forward and backward is good, but write the easiest thing. at first.
So Bill's going to write the sex scene first because
there's no sex scene in it. Not yet, anyway.
Dude, you said climax, dude. What else is climax? That's a sex scene. You're talking about.
I could put one in there. Maybe the guy could rape one of his victims.
No. Don't use the R word, man. No R word. So. You know what day and age we're living in. I mean, as much as I hate it, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway, moving on.
Okay. Well, and I do have to do a little bit of, make a little addendum on last week's episode. And there was a part where I said that it was Ruggiero's brother who went down in the arrest for drugs, or who had taken over the drug ring. It wasn't Ruggiero's brother. It was actually John Gotti's brother, Gene.
Oh.
I don't know how I got that mixed up.
I don't know either.
But that came out in my research for John Gotti. I was just like, oh, okay, well, I better, put that clear.
Angelo Ruggiero's brother, I think it was Sal, if memory serves me correctly, was the biggest importer for a while of heroin in New York City. He was a fugitive, and he died in a private plane crash. I think it was over South Carolina. North of South Carolina, and then Angelo Quack took over his brother's business as far as the contacts, and I think they in one of the books that I read, they went to his house out in New Jersey, and he had products sitting there, and Ruggiero went on to be the importer that his brother was. And you are right, there was a lot of the Gotti's guys that were in heroin. What was the name? Just one of the Carneglia brothers. His brother, what was John Gotti's brother? The one that went away for heroin trafficking?
Gene.
Yeah, Gene Gotti and John Carneglia. So yeah, a lot of the guys around Gotti. I don't know if Gotti was involved in heroin himself, but a lot of the guys he was around were either arrested for it, or went to jail for it. Tony Road Trampino was another guy. He was an associate. He got caught up on a state charge. He died in prison. But he was in jail for many years on heroin trafficking. Like I said, John's brother was in jail. John Carneglia was in jail. There were a couple of Mark Ryder. So there was a lot of guys around Gotti. I don't know if Gotti himself benefited from it, but the guys around him and associated were big time drug traffickers.
Okay. See, this is why we wanted to have you on.
Yes. Dude, and the Quack. Dude, I feel like Captain America in the first Avengers means like, I got that reference. Only because we did the Sammy episode last week. And I'm just like, when you said whoever it was, Quack, and I'm like, I know that. I got that.
So, all right, let's get started.
Yes.
John Gotti was born in the Bronx on October 27, 1940. His parents were immigrants. He had a rough childhood. He was one of 13 kids, which that's
Jesus.
Unbelievable to me.
Condoms, people. Condoms.
But it was common, though. It was common back then. And
I know.
His dad had a back-breaking job that didn't pay squat, and he was picked on in school because he had ragged clothes, and he would even wear mismatched shoes sometimes. So he had to learn how to fight. He had to learn how to fight early on. So when he was a teenager, his parents moved to Brooklyn, and things did get a little bit better for them, but at that time, Gotti had joined a street gang, and he had also learned how to hustle. And that swagger that he's known for, where he kind of walks around like with everybody thought it was like a strut, like kind of the Vince McMahon strut or whatever. That's not what it was. He had actually broke into a construction site, and he dropped a piece of heavy machinery on his foot, crushing several of his toes. And so he had to walk with a limp for the rest of his life, but he played it off like it was a swagger.
Oh, see, that's cool.
You sneaky bastard, you.
Dude, I know somebody that does something like that. You know him too, Bill.
I'm sure I do.
But we won't go there.
No. He was in a low-level crew that was actually part of the Gambino family. it was kind of like a farming. Or wait, Vic, was it the low level crew that he was part of initially? Was that part of the well, I'm getting mixed up. I'm thinking about Sammy Gravano, because Sammy Gravano started off with a different crew and then moved to the Gambino.
Sammy Gravano started with a gang, either in Brooklyn or Staten Island, but I think it was Brooklyn, called the Rampers. It was a street gang, and I guess eventually it kind of morphed into like a AAA affiliate for the mob. But
the Columbus.
And that happens. Like they start you young. Like guys will start hanging around the social clubs and stuff. And it starts off with, I just did another podcast the other day. Like in my neighborhood, you didn't even realize ways that the mob made money. So like in middle school and even in high school, I was bringing home gambling sheets. So there'd be a kid in school, usually Italian, and he would have those parlay sheets. So on the it was a piece of paper about this big. It was like a card. And you had all the Sunday football games. So Jets, Packers, Raiders, Saints. And you picked, I think if you hit 3 for 3, $1 bet is you'd win $10 if you picked 4 out of 5. It was better odds, than going to Vegas. So, and you could bet $1, $2. So as kids, we were gambling in middle school and high school. Again, it was always an Italian kid whose uncle was in the mob or his father was in the mob. Oh. So you just saw things. And then later on, some of the guys I grew up with and went to school with, they'd be hanging around the social clubs. They'd start off as gophers. And then basically what the mob is the mob is protection for street people that are doing things out of bounds. And you hook up with a mob. If you're going to be an associate with a family, you hook up with a made guy or a captain, and you earn. And you're on record with this person. And whatever your scam is, you're a car thief, you're a drug dealer, you're running a credit card scam. The reason you're under the umbrella of one of these guys is if someone tries to rip you off or kidnap you or infringe on your business, you can, whoa, I'm with
so-and-so.
Yeah, I'm with Sally the Hook. Well, I'm just making up a name. I'm with Sal the Hook. You got to go see him. So you don't get screwed with by other bad guys, or another mob family doesn't land on you and try to claim you.
Okay.
Right on.
And
was Gravano basically claimed from the Columbos by the Gambinos, or did it just gradually happen, or was it like the Gambino said?
I think he was with the Rampers, that street gang, and then Gravano was in the military for a while, and I don't know if he was discharged or he did his time, but he came home, and the Rampers had basically grown up, and I think he was with. You are right. He was with the Columbos for a while, and I don't know the exact incident, but he was released from the Columbos, almost like a trade. He was released from the Columbos, and then he was put under a Gambino captain, and that's where he got his button and, was an earner and eventually a killer, and that's how he became a made guy and then later on went into upper management.
Yeah.
I love the sports references here because that makes it like completely much more understandable than anything else.
It does.
Because I'm not a huge sports fan, but I got everything you said. Like, that gang was like AAA, and I'm like, I got that. Again, I feel like Captain America in the first Avengers movie. I got that reference.
So,
but yeah, no, that makes it way more understandable than the stuff you can find on the internet or whatever. Now I get it.
And the mob will use these young guys to send a message to somebody, say for argument's sake, they tell some guy to stay out of someone's business and the guy just kind of blows it off. They'll send a couple of these young guys who eventually they want to be inducted into a family. So they'll do, whatever work is asked of them. So go over, that pizzeria guy gave my daughter a problem, or he's not falling into the line. He's not using my linens company or whatever. Yeah. So when he's closing up, maybe one day this week, go in there and smack him around. Or when he's closing up shop, maybe wear an Abraham Lincoln mask and a baseball bat and give him a crack. You know what I mean? So he falls into line. So it's almost insulating themselves. Oh, but don't get me wrong. They'll use their own guys, but if you've got young guys that are dying to get in, use them.
Oh, hell yeah. No, that's, yeah, totally. Oh, no, that's so good, though. See?
So, Emilio Della Croce, or Neil, he first noticed Gotti, and Della Croce was high up in the Gambinos, and he liked Gotti's loyalty, energy, and work ethic, and he was ultimately responsible for bringing Gotti into the Gambino family.
I don't know if he was or he wasn't, but at some point, yes, he was very close with John Gotti. You got to remember, John Gotti was a hijacker.
Right.
John Gotti was a Renaissance criminal. I mean, wherever the money was, he was involved in it. I'm talking about this as an associate. It's not like he was a guy that, he was born into it. He had the fast tracked in, and the way Gotti got made and the way Gotti really, went up the pecking order was there was this crew of Irish guys that were kidnapping families of the Mafia in the early 1970s and holding them for ransom. And it was pissing the mob off to no point because they couldn't figure out who was doing it. And I think the guy's name was Manny Gambino, who was the nephew of the late, Gambino crime family head, Carlo Gambino. Mm-hmm. They kidnapped him, and something happened where this guy lost his life. I don't exactly know how it happened, but it happened. So the Gambinos took a contract out on this guy in Staten Island by the name of James McBranty. I believe they thought he was involved in I don't know if he was involved in the homicide of Manny Gambino. He was or he wasn't, but they targeted him for death because they thought he was. So
I've got that coming up in my notes.
Okay.
No, it's fine.
So what they do?
Fine.
So Gotti gets the contract, and it's John Gotti, Angelo Ruggiero, and another guy, Ralphie Wiggs Galleone. They go out to this bar out in Staten Island and posing as cops. And they're trying to say, all right, you're under arrest. You're coming with us. McBranty basically either just doesn't want to deal with cops or he knows something's not right. He starts fighting with them. And one of the guys, I don't know if it's Angelo or the guy, Galleone, killed this guy.
He was doing a good job, too. He was holding his own. He was holding his own for a little bit.
He was supposedly a rough guy, and they wind up killing this guy in the bar. They get away. The cops arrest them, and Gotti and Galleone is killed. And I don't know if Galleone is killed for because he botched that hit or caused too much heat, or there was something else. But out of the three of them, one is killed, and through the Gambino crime family, there was a famous mob attorney by the name of Roy Cohen. The guy was just, had more connections, and through the Gambino crime family, they secured Roy Cohen, who worked out a sweetheart of a deal for Gotti and Ruggiero, where they got off on a manslaughter charge. They did minimum time. I think it was under 5 years. Maybe they were sentenced to 5 years. They got out in 3. He didn't do much time. And there's a really good movie. It's a 1970s movie. I think it came out in 73 called The 7-Ups with Roy Scheider. It's about... And it's actually the story is from Sonny Grasso, who was an NYPD detective that was involved in the French Connection case. It kind of goes into, it shows what was going on with these Irish guys that are kidnapping the Italians and holding them for ransom. And, the mob didn't know, was it a gang of cops doing this or was it banditos doing this? And it's a really good movie. It's loosely based on that story.
Well, the Cohn, he represented Joe McCarthy in the 50s. He prosecuted the Rosenbergs, and he even later represented Donald Trump.
Oh, he's one of these guys that shows up in American history. He was Joe McCarthy's protege, as far as he was the one doing the heavy lifting during the McCarthy hearings, and then he went out into private service, and he became, he was like a Bruce Cutler or Shargell or Ron Kuby or Kunstler of his time, but I think even better and with more connections.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally. Anyway.
So, Gotti then, after he was released, he became the captain of a crew in Queens, and even early on, he still, walked with that swagger, that air quote swagger,
the broken foot that was limp that he turned into fucking something that made him look
I don't
cool.
think it was a broken foot. I think he lost a
Smashed his
piece of
toes.
he lost a couple of toes or a
Toes.
toe.
All right.
Is if I read it correctly.
Yeah. So he would become
my bad.
a strict and intimidating captain, and he would fly off the handle at the slightest insult. He would have anybody killed. And he rose through the ranks, with loan sharking and, and with hijacking. And this shows that he was good with money and that he could also be an effective enforcer. So, when he was 22, he married Victoria Di Giorgio, I guess, but
it was almost 3. I couldn't figure out where my camera was. I couldn't get my fingers up in time. My bad.
I bailed on it. But Gotti didn't really believe much in monogamy, but Victoria was aware of everything that happened, but although I'm sure that if she wanted to go around and mess with some other dude, that she and that other guy would both be sleeping with the fishes.
Yeah, probably. It's funny how it works like that.
Yeah. So they came from meager beginnings, not a lot of money, and she and one of their children were in the hospital one time, and this is how broke they were. And Gotti sneaked in and snuck them out after they had been treated and everything because he couldn't pay the bill. So he just kind of, it's like a prison break, but from a hospital.
Now there's a movie. There's a low budget movie, Hospital Break.
Hospital Break. They had 5 kids and they lived in a small house in Queens, and he was great with his kids and his wife for the most part, but he always wanted to be a high ranking member of the mob. And one day one of his kids was hit by a car and killed. And the man who hit him was a neighbor of his named John Favara. And it was ruled an accident, and Favara went to them to apologize, and Victoria, not John, came at him with a baseball bat. But Favara was later kidnapped by a group of men from his job, and he vanished. There are witnesses to the kidnapping, but no positive identification. Favara was never seen again, and it's believed that his body was dissolved in an acid barrel.
Oh.
Yeah, that happened. Again, you got to remember with Gotti, when he rose to fame in '85 with the Castellano, I wasn't even a cop yet. So, I mean, all I know is from and I've never worked a case with, any of those guys. This was before my time. I love, I'm fascinated by organized crime. I read a lot of books. My knowledge is from books. And a lot of times, everybody's got there's 3 sides to a story, right? So there's what he said, what she said. The truth is somewhere in the middle. But yes, that man was an accident. John Gotti's son, unfortunately, lost his life. It was terrible. The man vanished off the face of the earth. There's been a couple of people that have kind of filled in some of the pieces, but no one has actually put the whole puzzle together, and that is an unsolved homicide or an unsolved. Yeah. I know the guy was declared legally dead after several years, and just the fact that, there were witnesses that seen him getting pulled into a van, never to be seen again. So it's fair to say, he's no longer with us.
Yeah, he was handled.
He was handled. But Gotti had an alibi for this. He was supposedly away in Florida when this happened.
Yeah, I don't think his hands touched that at all.
Nah, I mean it was surprising to learn last week that Gravano only actually pulled the trigger on one of the 19 hits that he was involved with.
Yeah,
I mean that was kind of a shocker to me. I didn't see that coming. I thought that he was, when you hear hitman, you think he's the one that goes out and does it.
Yeah, but if you're there, if you're involved in the planning, if you're a lookout, if you're the getaway driver,
right, then you're culpable.
Yeah, you're just as culpable as the guy pulling the trigger, and if you're there, just as easily you could get hurt or killed. I mean, I worked on a case where we had these guys, car thieves up in the Bronx, and they were in the murder for hire business. And one guy, we were able to basically closed between 13 and 15 homicides on. When we took that case down, one of his friends was the getaway driver in multiple homicides. And we had already his buddy was already going down for at least 10 years enterprise corruption, which is like the state charge, RICO charge.
RICO,
and
yes.
Basically when that case came down, we pulled his buddy aside. It's like, look, you're going for these homicides, and we can't put you at all of them, but we can put you at a lot of them, and you're going to jail for the rest of your life. So, you might want to start talking. And he did, and he laid out chapter and verse. This guy, this was a contract hit. We were paid to do this. One of the homicides was a contract hit up in Connecticut where it was interstate and went federal, where they went up there with a motorcycle and a U-Haul truck. They followed this guy around. When the guy stopped at a light, they pull up on a motorcycle. The gunman shoots the guy multiple times. They take the motorcycle, drive it into a U-Haul truck, bring it back to the Bronx, and I don't know if they chopped it or tagged it or whatever they did, or buried it, whatever they did with the bike. But, I mean, there was multiple homicides like this that his buddy would have gone to jail for the rest of his life or even possibly have gotten the death penalty. So he signed up with, Team America.
Right on.
So
that's why I love having Vic on the show, because what we're talking about right now may be before his time, but he is bringing so much insight into it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, dude, I love it, dude. Thanks, Vic. I appreciate you being here again, brother. Because, dude, your insight, like I said, you said that this case was before your time, but you just, you know how things work, and I love it. Thank you so much for being here again, bro.
So by the late 1970s, Gotti was a vicious captain or capo, a rising star, a major money earner, and he feared nobody. So in 1976, Carlo Gambino died of natural causes, and Neil Delacroce was the majority of the family's top choice to be the successor, but Gambino had chosen his cousin Paul Castellano. And this pissed a lot of people off. And a couple different factions popped up, and people who supported Castellano and people who supported Delacroce. Gotti, of course, was in the Delacroce camp, and he didn't like Castellano. He thought he was weak.
All right.
And Castellano just wanted the money that his earners would bring in, and he kept to himself. He didn't hang out in the clubs with his guys or anything that normal crime bosses do. He was strictly a businessman. And this was when Gotti.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh at that. That just sounded funny.
Well, I mean, there's a certain way of doing things, and
oh yeah,
there's a little bit of irony of this, of how they went from Castellano to Gotti.
Well,
they went from one extreme to the other as far as the way
before Don Carlo dies, he names a successor, which is his cousin and brother-in-law, Big Paul Castellano. And Big Paul he was a thug, but he was also a business guy. And, by the time Carlo Gambino died, Big Paul Castellano was, and it's going to sound ridiculous, but he was like the biggest chicken guy in New York City. I mean, he owned
he had a big pork plant,
multiple processing places, food stores. I mean, he was tremendous. Actually, during one of his trials, they subpoenaed Frank Perdue, and they said, why were you dealing with him? And he says, he's the biggest chicken guy in New York. He's the Godfather. Why else wouldn't I had to deal with him.
So I don't have a choice.
Yeah, Big Paul, you got to remember, his cousin ran New York, so he didn't have to do the high. After as a young man, I think he got arrested for a bank robbery and a couple of minor things, but he went into more the business aspect, and he was taking the family's never going to be 100% legit, but you got to be able to hide your money, and the best way to do that is acquiring legitimate businesses. And the mob works like this. So say you own a butcher shop and you're buying your meat from a wholesale guy that's owned by the mob, right? Mm-hmm. And you're buying $5,000. I'm just giving raw numbers. You're buying $5,000 in meat from a mob affiliated place, and One day, you can't pay your bill. Oh, Vic, don't worry about it. Just put it on your tab. Well, after a couple of months, you owe $40,000, $50,000. They're going to come in and they're going to go, well, today's the day. We want to get paid. And there's one or two ways they're going to do it. Either now you got a partner, right? And they're going to put their people in to watch it. And now basically you're a lackey in your own business, or they're going to take it from you. And you don't go to the cops. You owe them the money, you sign it over. Or like you saw in the movie Goodfellas, they do a bust out where they just start ordering things on credit. And it's going out the back door. You're ordering meat from other different places that aren't mob affiliated, and that meat's going back to their wholesale place, or you're charging tickets to vacation, and then basically the business goes under. You're free of debt from them. Your credit's all screwed up, or now you got a partner. These people are now a part of your life. So that's how big Paul Castellano was. Whereas Dela Croce, he was an old school guy. He never really forgot who he was. He was involved in gambling and loan sharking. And I'm guessing like Big Paul, although he would take money from that side of the family, he kind of looked down his nose at them, but he still took the money, which pissed off the other side of the family. So you're right. There was a split after Don Carlo died, but Dela Croce was a good soldier. And Big Paul, to keep everybody happy, said, okay, you're going to be my underboss. Right. Which was kind of like second runner-up. Yeah. But Dela Croce wasn't going to rock the boat, and he said, fine. But that still didn't sit well with the guys under Dela Croce, and that was his nephew, which was Angelo Ruggiero and John Gotti. So, there was always that, we got to work for this guy, but we really don't like this guy, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah.
Well, and that's one thing. Well, we'll get there. I was gonna bring up Gravano again, but like I said, that episode doesn't exist right now. No. So we'll get there. Because I do have that. I do have where I was going in the notes. So, but this was when Gotti first started setting his sights on Castellano. But Neil was able, Dela Croce, he was able to keep Gotti and his people reeled in. But Dela Croce, shortly after Castellano became the boss, he died, which left Gotti unsupervised.
There's more to it. So,
this is what I want to hear.
Well, Dela Croce is alive. Remember we were talking about earlier, a lot of the guys around Gotti, so if Gotti was a captain, I don't know the time period again, I don't want to misspeak, but let's just say Gotti was a captain, a lot of people around him were involved in drug trafficking. And Angelo Ruggiero got caught on a wiretap and was arrested and charged federally with heroin. I think it was heroin trafficking. So Big Paul Castellano is pissed. And
as you would be.
Big Paul Castellano goes to Dela Croce and says, so when you get arrested and things are going to trial, the government has to hand over. They have to show their cards. They have to provide wiretap information. They have to provide to your defense attorney so you can.
Oh, okay. Because that's literally it's almost like you know my notes by heart because
no, but I mean I follow this stuff so.
Right,
so
he used to be a detective. He
I
knows
know, but I was curious. I was curious about because in there's Dela Croce on tape or Castellano who was like demanding the tapes, and I was like wondering how the hell.
So Castellano through Dela Croce is telling, I want those tapes. I want to review them because obviously when they got arrested, they're like, no, Paul, we're not involved in heroin trafficking. It's a bullshit case, blah, blah. So Big Paul is like, okay, great. I want to listen to those tapes. But in addition to him being, Angelo and the guys around Gotti being caught red-handed on these wiretaps, Ruggiero is speaking about Big Paul disparagingly. And he knows if those tapes, Big Paul is going to have him killed, might have Gotti killed. They might clean house. They might take out a whole crew. Even though these guys were very dangerous, there was the thought, well, someone's going to get killed over this. So there's a wiretap, and it's either in Dela Croce's house or when he was in the hospital, and he's like, the boss is the boss is the boss. He wants those tapes. And Angelo is arguing, saying, I can't give up those tapes. There's people going to get hurt over these tapes. So Dela Croce is very ill. So Castellano was giving him a little bit more time, but they know once Della Croce can't protect them anymore, once, he's going to die of cancer. So that's where Gotti and his people got together with Gravano and Frank DeCicco out in Brooklyn, where they were able to get, a rival faction together to take out Big Paul Castellano, because they knew he would either, at the very least, break up their crew, but more than likely there was going to be a couple of people killed over it. So they took the preemptive strike and went after Big Paul.
Right. So, and it right here is where, the quack quack name first comes up. And it was
Quack.
Ruggiero was, he had a big mouth. He liked to talk, and he loved to talk. He liked to talk as much as I do, but he would talk about things that he shouldn't be talking about, and that earned him the name Quack Quack.
Quack quack. I love that.
The old timers wouldn't talk on a phone. The old mobsters, guys, they would, and sometimes if they didn't know you that well, they'd bring you into a room and run water or take you someplace where there was a lot of noise just in case someone was listening. Some of them old time guys wouldn't even have a phone in their house. But yeah, unfortunately, and everybody knows how easy it is nowadays to tap a phone, but guys, they let their guard down.
Right.
Dude, Google is listening. I don't care what anybody says.
Well, yeah, that too.
Goddamn AI is fucking controlling the world right now, man. Dude, you know what, dude? It's not even Google. It's Google's AI. Because, you give your phone permission, dude. As soon as you talk about something, boom, that's all the ads you get.
And I'm sure that I'm on a list somewhere because of all the shit that I look at.
Dude, you and me both, brother. You and me both are on a list somewhere. Because, we Google some crazy stuff. Like, why are they Googling that?
Why
does this guy want to know how to make a bomb? I get in the head of the guy that I'm doing on a podcast. I don't want to make a bomb. But you Googled it. Patriot Act.
Castellano, I'm just going to kind of breeze through this because, Vicky already covered it.
Yeah. He gave us information that you weren't going to give us.
This is true. So Castellano didn't want to be involved with the drugs because if you get caught with them, it's physical evidence, and you're pretty much guilty if you're caught with drugs.
Guys, the old timers would take. See, the thing is, the quickest way to go murder back then was a part of the job in the mob, right? Like if someone stepped out of line, or sometimes to make an example of somebody, they'd kill you. Now, the two quickest way to go to jail for the rest of your life is a homicide or a drug charge, because federal guidelines, and even with in the state of New York with the Rockefeller laws that came on the books, I guess it was the 70s, they started increasing the penalty. So if you got caught for heroin trafficking federally, you could do 30, 40, you could go to jail for the rest of your life. That means guys are more cooperative to flipping. So, it's one thing to go to jail for a couple of years for a hijacking. It's another, they got your balls in a vice for 30 years. The thought process is, well, this guy could flip. He's not going to hold up when he's facing that type of, anybody in their 30s, 40 years old, you go to jail for the rest of your life, they give you 30 years. So a lot of the old timers like the Chin, Vincent the Chin Gigante, and Paul Castellano, also on one of those wiretaps, Ruggiero was talking about the Chin and Paul got together and they said, anybody involved with drugs, they're going. Like they're not going to have an investigation. Their names get mentioned with drugs, they're going. So did Big Paul know the guy? I would think it would be next to impossible for him not to know.
Exactly.
That where the money is coming from. You can only make so much money from hijacking or loan sharking, and some of the old timers around Big Paul. I can't think of the guy's name. Was an old timer. Was into heroin and he stopped. And then when Gotti came, and then when Gotti took over, I think it's from Sammy the Bull or somebody went to this guy and says, "Remember what you used to do? Start doing that again because we need money." So it's one of those things. It's they turned a blind eye to it, but they're going to take the money from it. But it's a catch-22. Make as much money as you can, but if you get caught out of bounds, you're going.
Yep.
Yeah. So, so in December of '85, Delacroce dies of cancer. And like I said before, he was really the only one that was holding the Castellano haters back. And it was kind of looking like there was going to be a war within the Gambino crime family. And Castellano was already suspicious of Gotti, so Gotti decided it was now or never. Castellano was going to kill Gotti unless Gotti got to, unless
Where's the camera?
unless Gotti got to Castellano first.
Oh, you did it in two. In case you don't know, Bill told me to start like holding up fingers and counting every time he stammers and stutters through something.
I got hung up on something. Well, it happens with me a lot.
So I've been doing that, and that's what that is, in case you're wondering.
So in addition to Big Paul having this problem, right, with Gotti's guys and Delacroce holding them back, you got to remember Big Paul had maybe at least one or two federal cases drop on him just before he was killed. So here you got Big Paul. He was in his late 60s or early 70s, right? He's living out in Staten Island. He's got this thing going on. You know, his family life is in the shambles because he's having sex with the maid. And I don't know, exactly how that happened, but that's going on. He's a diabetic, and he's got these federal cases going on. He's not a young man, so he's like, I'll get to Gotti's guys. I'm sure in the back of his mind he's saying, well, this is going to play itself out. After Christmas, I'm going to clean house or whatever. And Gotti beat him to the punch. Gotti was a hell of a lot younger, a lot more cunning. You know what I mean? You talk Big Paul at this stage in his life as a businessman. John Gotti's a gangster. And right. Gotti had the right people listening to him. He was able to garner support because a lot of guys in the different crews really weren't thrilled with Big Paul because I think he wanted more money from them, was like increasing whatever it was, the percentages and the envelopes he was getting every month. And he was more into construction. He didn't, he really wasn't sympathetic to the rank and file guys. And that's how Gotti was able to stage that coup.
Right. And he wouldn't, and the thing is, I mean, it would be one thing if you're raising the percentages or whatever, if you're going to the clubs and hanging out with your guys, but he's not doing that. He's just sitting there in his mansion or sitting there in his office at his poultry plant and everything, just saying, give me money, do this, do that. But I'm not going to come hang out with you because I'm above you. And that's ultimately what, really that's the majority of what rubbed people the wrong way about Castellano.
Yeah, and it enables Gotti and his guys, Angelo, and to drive that wedge. And again, the guys that really made that come together was, you got to remember, like the real tough guys, the captains was Roy DeMeo. He's dead, right? And they kind of broke up his crew. Those guys from Murder Machine out in Brooklyn. So Gotti, through Angelo Ruggiero, was able to go to Frank DeCicco, who was very well respected out in Brooklyn, and Sammy had a heavy crew in Brooklyn, and he was able to convince them to come over his side. A lot of things could have went wrong if Gotti had the firepower to get to Paul, but he needed that support to bring other guys into line.
Because of the fact that DeCicco and Gravano were Castellano guys.
So. Especially DeCicco. DeCicco was very close with Paul. And Gravano too, because Sammy talks about in his book and in interviews that one time Big Paul, gave him a compliment, and he said, Sammy, not only are you a racketeer, meaning you're running unions and running businesses, but you're also a thug, which is very helpful to a guy like Big Paul, because not only is he an earner, but at the drop of the hat, he'll go and kill somebody and get it done. So, that's a guy you want to keep close to you if you need him. Absolutely.
So, Gotti decided that he should be the replacement for Castellano. And he saw himself as the embodiment of what the Mafia was supposed to be.
Of course he did.
Yeah. So, while killing a boss is a big no-no, it can happen with the blessing of other bosses, but this is something that Gotti didn't have. the other four crime family bosses weren't going to approve of this. So
no, but the way he was able to get away with it for so long was the only real boss that was left in the street that didn't get swept up in the commission case and all the other big cases was the Chin. Vincent the Chin Gigante. They call him the West Side or the Genovese crime family. You got to remember, Persico.
He wound up going down as a result of Sammy Gravano's testimony as well.
Yeah, but years later. But Gotti probably would have gotten dealt with if the Lucchese's were intact, the Colombos were intact, if their bosses weren't either away or in the fight of their lives in those big cases that Giuliani brought against the mob. Gotti really didn't have to worry about retaliation other than the Chin. It was only one group of guys, and early on they had a meeting with the Chin, and they said, well, we don't know who killed Paul, but we're going to investigate it ourselves. And supposedly the Chin told Gotti, someone's going to have to answer for Paul. And while this is going on shortly after Big Paul is killed, Angelo Ruggiero did not like Anthony Gaspar Casso. They had a falling out over a drug deal or something, and Gotti, I don't know if Gotti sanctioned it, but Angelo Ruggiero used a couple of guys to try to kill Gaspipe, and the hit went sideways. And Gaspipe now has got a hard-on for these guys, and Gaspipe gets together with the Chin, and that's how Frank DeChico gets killed. Gaspipe, through his guys, put a bomb underneath his car. It's guys in the street at some point you can get to. The Chin was very difficult to kill because he kept at odd hours. He was always surrounded by people.
I had DeChico. I had him. From the research that I have in my notes and everything, that hit that took out DeChico was intended for Gotti.
Yes.
Okay.
It was. It was because Gotti was supposed to be there that day, but you got to realize something. What the Chin was doing, and with Gaspipe, they were going around bumping off a lot of the heavy hitters close to Gotti to weaken him, so it would be easier to get to him. So there was another big heroin trafficker who was supposedly a cold-blooded hitman, Eddie Lino. So what Gaspipe does is from the Lucchese's, he hires the Mafia cops, Caracappa and Eppolito. They go to pull Eddie Lino over. He thinks the cops are pulling him over. They kill him. Who else? They killed a couple of guys. I can't think of the guy's name. Is Bartholomew. I can't think of his name. Bobby Borriello. That's another guy that was close to Gotti. He was one of his bodyguards. They kill him. So what they're trying, Sammy even admits now that he had a target on his back. So what the Chin was doing with the help of Gaspipe, they were going after taking out a lot of Gotti's hitmen and heavy hit earners and heavy hitters to weaken him, that it would be that much easier to get to him.
Right on.
Okay. So now we're getting up to the hit. Probably.
Dude, I love how he calls the guy the Chin, dude. I'm just thinking of like Big Trouble in Little China or something every time you are saying the Chin, Vic. I mean, I know they called him that because obviously something else, but it just makes me think of like a weird kung fu movie going on when you say the Chin.
Well, the thing with the Chin was he spoke to very few people, and if you turned up on a wiretap saying his name, he'd have you killed. So if you would reference him, you had to point to your Chin or say that guy or my Aunt Julia. But if you turned up on a wiretap saying his name, and he didn't care what family you were from, he was going to have you whacked.
You were dead, yeah.
Yeah.
No, but dude, just calling this guy the Chin because I picture the guy you're talking about as like a big, greasy Italian mob guy. You know what I mean? But when you call him the Chin, though, that just makes me think of those old kung fu movies from the 70s that I'm sure we've all watched at least once or twice.
Now,
Anyway, that's just how my mind works. I'm sorry.
Interesting side note here, Vic. Our episode 26 is by far, I'm going there again. By an overwhelming majority is our most listened to episode. Don't know why, but it just is. But it's James Keene and Larry Hall, and James Keene was a drug dealer who went into prison, and they made him a deal that if he went and got a confession out of serial killer Larry Hall, that he would he would walk. And so he went into the Springfield mental facility that really
for white boys.
And it's a really heavy prison. And Gigante was there at the time, and he actually had interaction with with James Keene and everything, because James Keene was also Italian, and he wanted with him, but James Keene was there for other reasons. He was undercover and nobody knew it and everything. And it's interesting tie-in. That episode comes up a lot.
It does.
In other cases that we do. And I was really shocked, when we were doing the Gravano case to hear, it's like, okay, we're referencing episode 26 again.
Again.
But if you're not familiar with that story, that's one you might want to check out, because that's a really
Springfield
story.
So in the federal prison system, there's only a couple of prison hospitals, and the big one is in Springfield, Missouri, and there's another one in Bunter, North or South Carolina. I think there's one other medical facility, but that's where they'll ship like the older guys that are having health problems, or someone needs surgery or some type of treatment or testing. They'll go to Springfield or Bunter or Butner.
Yeah, but it's just interesting side note, because it's just so weird how it's just like I'm doing research on something that's like, all of a sudden there's another reference to episode 26, and I totally wasn't expecting it on these two episodes, but there it was. Gigante.
Everything is intertwined, man. That's how life works. You know what I mean?
So,
everything is intertwined.
Yeah. So Gotti decided that, he's going to take Castellano down. And in his mind, it was kill or be killed, and he was probably right. But the plan that he hatched was brilliant. Ruggiero, at Gotti's request, approached Sammy Gravano, and this is where the two episodes are going to start coinciding. But
we'll put time codes in it. Just skip ahead.
No, don't skip ahead, because there's a different side of the story.
All right.
So Sammy Gravano, like we said, was a Castellano guy, and he was also the Gambino family, as well as the entire U.S.
Oh, it was only one. Damn it.
As well as the U.S. Mafia's. He was the most feared hitman at the time, and he told Ruggiero told Sammy that Gotti was going to take out Castellano, and Sammy was all in after consulting with Frank DiCiccio, who was also Castellano's underboss.
All right, then.
So they decided to go out with it. And the actual plan, the setting up the plan, putting everything together, that was Gotti. But the actual execution, the plan.
Sammy put that whole thing together and I've watched a couple interviews and I've read a lot of stuff. Gotti kind of wanted to run it, and DiCiccio told Gotti, Sammy's been involved in multiple hits. He was involved in the Colombo Wars. Let Sammy put it together. Sammy, I think, was the guy that John had Angelo go out and send out.
That's what I meant. That's what I meant.
Yeah, but Sammy put the hardware together and the guys in motion.
And the plan that Sammy came up with was just brilliant. It was foolproof.
Is this what we talked about last week? Because yes, it was.
Yes, that's where we are now. So oh God. So it was foolproof. The case was unsolved for a long time, which we're going to get to. So here we are on December 16th, 1985. Gotti learns that Paul Castellano was going to have dinner at Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan. Vic, have you ever eaten there?
No. It's out of my price range.
Out of your price.
Okay. I was just curious. I had to ask.
Is that one of those places that serves like the 3-month-old steak that's been sitting in a closet and they just cut the mold off and cook it for you?
They age their beef, and it's, everything. I'm guessing if it's like any of the more expensive steakhouses in New York, it's, the potato is $14, and if you want, grilled, it's all about the steak.
Dude, the whole dry aging thing though just baffles me. Because basically you're taking a ribeye, which is a great cut of steak, and you're putting it in a closet.
No, it's refrigerated. It's
no, dude. The dry aging that I've seen, dude, people do it like in non-refrigerated places.
Not the places in New York, because like especially in the theater district, you have some of these places where the meat is in the window. And it's in a refrigerated case that faces the glass. So and they've got the temperature. It's in refrigerated. My dad was a butcher. Aged meat is delicious.
The stuff that I've seen on TV, and like I said, again, I've only seen it on TV, and that has to be true.
His dad was a butcher.
I know. His dad was a butcher. Dude, I can't even remember the thing from Tommy Boy that I was just going to do.
Anyway,
so hashtag I digress this time. And we're moving on.
So now it was go time, and Castellano and his underboss, Tommy Bellotti, he had left his attorney's office, and they went to dinner. And it was 10 days shy of Christmas, and so the streets would be full of Christmas shoppers. So when shots rang out, there would be chaos, and they'd be able to slip away, and that's exactly what happened. So Castellano and Bellotti arrived, and they parked on the street, and at one point they had, Sammy and John Gotti were in the car on the other side of the street, and at one point they pulled up right side by side but across the street from Gotti and Gravano. And Gravano in interviews said, if he looks over, I'm just going to shoot him right now. If he looks over, but Castellano didn't look over.
Wow.
So, cause if,
wow. Holy wow.
Yeah.
All right.
So Gotti on a two-way radio, he let the four shooters know that the target had arrived. There were 7 other people there too, backup shooters, spotters and stuff like that. There were a total of 11 people in addition to Gotti and Gravano that were on the scene.
But this was Sammy's plan, right? That's
yes.
what?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because Gotti couldn't have thought of something this intricate. Jesus Christ.
And
snipers and people inside.
Big Paul was going to meet a couple of captains inside of Sparks. So there was more to that plan, because inside Sparks Steakhouse, and they were the older captains, and Frank Chico was already there with a handgun. So his job was, the whole thing was set up when Chico found out that Big Paul wanted to meet a bunch of them for dinner. That's when he said, okay, it's on. This is the opportunity we've been waiting for.
This is it.
And the Chico got there early and greeted the guys who had no idea this was going to happen.
Right.
Before Big Paul gets killed out front, he basically lets these guys know, I've got a gun. Don't move. Just sit down and relax. And basically told them what time it was so that they didn't get involved from the inside, because the whole thing was predicated about this dinner, like the Last Supper. And DeChico basically handled the guys that were inside the steakhouse not to get involved.
Oh,
okay. I didn't come across that.
That wasn't in the notes.
Nope.
Hell yeah.
But that's
how they knew he was going to Sparks.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Hell yeah.
But they didn't. The shooters didn't even know who they were whacking. They just know that they were whacking, and when the whacker gets an order to whack, they whack.
I think they knew. I mean, I know Sammy says he was not sure, but I mean, especially the guys. Maybe the backup shooters didn't know. Maybe the backup shooters who were supposed to, kill anybody that got involved. But I mean, obviously, the guys that are going to pull the trigger, the guys that are rushing up to a car. Come on, they
know who they're shooting.
They know Big Paul. They know the car Bellotti drives.
They know the car, yeah.
Yeah.
They're not going to run the car and go, oh my God, this is the boss, and then run away.
No,
dude, I was paid to shoot this guy. It doesn't matter who it is.
So, so they were all dressed in white trench coat with the big Russian fur hats, and they so that any witnesses who got to look at them, they'd only be able to describe the outfits like Russian hitmen.
Yes, that was a brilliant move.
Mm-hmm. So when Castellano arrived, Gotti radioed the other shooters that it was on and described the car to him. And once they were parked, the four men, two on each side of the car, they opened fire. And Castellano and Bellotti were dead in the street. The boss and the underboss of the Gambino family both taken out at the same time. The shooters jumped in the car with Gotti and Gravano, and they drove off. And this is a big deal, not just to the mafia world, but to the general public and the media and law enforcement as well. They were worried that DeCicco and Gravano were going to go on the warpath looking for whoever had done this. And everyone was worried about the possibility of a mafia war in the streets that hadn't been something that hadn't been seen since Prohibition. And nobody suspected Gravano and DeCicco's involvement because they, like I said, they were both Castellano guys. So it was the perfect plan.
It was a beautiful plan.
So,
right, but obviously as the days go by and Gravano and DeCicco aren't running around looking to see who did this,
right?
It became apparent in the organization that, okay, this is what it knows. And law enforcement didn't know. The newspapers didn't know.
They put it together a little bit later. They figured it out.
Yeah,
but
like anything else, right?
But overnight, Gotti became the premier Gambino mobster. There was a power vacuum, and Gotti was stepping in and taking over. And Gotti was voted in as the new boss by the captains. He was only 45 years old when he took over, and I believe that's the youngest crime boss that there's ever been. Am I right about that, Vic?
It's possible. I don't know that to be true, but he was in his 40s when he took the reins. So I would say one of the younger ones at the very least.
Yeah, I'm 49 and I'm just a stupid podcaster.
I'm gonna make you an offer you can't.
Gotti's 45 and running the Gambino family.
Yeah, but see, Bill, dude, you don't kill people. That's the difference right there.
That you know of.
You don't kill people, dude.
So,
I know you well enough to know that, dude. That's the difference between your ambition and his ambition. His ambition was, I'll do whatever it takes to get to the top. You were like, I'll do whatever it takes to get me as high as I can get in this life. And that's me too, dude. I am the same guy. I am the guy that I'll do as little as it takes to get me as far along as life as I can get.
So,
anyway, I digress. Moving on.
DeCicco becomes Gotti's underboss, and with Gravano as the number 3 guy. And that wouldn't last long because, like we talked about earlier, there was a hit that was meant for Gotti. It was likely put up by the Genovese family. They took DeCicco out, and Sammy became the new underboss. Now the press loved Gotti. Law enforcement wanted him, and he had multiple targets on him from mafia detractors, law enforcement, and he ultimately became public enemy number 1, all while living on camera, high on the hog, wearing expensive suits with a cunning grin, getting his manicures done every day, getting his hair, expensive hairstyle done every day. And this is different from him because he was just a street thug before, but now he's just this chic celebrity and everything, and, like a fashion mogul or something. And
he's a narcissist.
So this is where the name the Dapper Don comes in.
Dude, I always thought I always thought when everybody says the Dapper Don, I always thought they were talking about Donald Trump.
No, the newspapers, especially like the New York, the Daily News or the New York Post, they do it with sports figures in New York. Anybody that rises to anything, they're going to give you a nickname and they're going to beat it to death. So yeah, the Dapper Don. Then when he started beating court cases, became the Teflon Don.
The Teflon Don. That's what I remember.
That's just New York. It's once you get into their crosshairs, they're going to give you a nickname.
Right.
All right.
So he became a tyrant, and he wouldn't hesitate to admonish anybody. He would just basically verbally cut you down in public, right after patting you on the back and saying good job. He'd tell you to fuck off. So,
dude, everybody does that. I'll be like, hey, good job today. Now fuck off. Get out of my life.
So he was ruthless, and if you pissed Gotti off, you were dead. And Gotti didn't care about the consequences because he thought that he was untouchable.
Well, that happens.
So in 1985, Gotti had a disagreement with a refrigerator repairman named Ramal Pikesk.
Yeah.
Did I say that right, Vic?
I don't know.
I don't know how to pronounce it, but I know what you're talking about.
We'll just call him Pike. We'll just call him Pike.
Call him Pike.
So Gotti had double parked at a bar in Queens, and he had blocked Pike in. Pike, not realizing who it was initially, started honking his horn, which pissed Gotti off. He told Pike, to go fuck himself, but Pike stood up to him, which pissed Gotti off even more. So Gotti and his guys start roughing Pike up, and they stole his money. So Pike calls the police, and still not realizing who it was, he files a police report. Gotti's arrested for assault and robbery. And 2 years later, that went to trial. But by then, Pike had figured out who it was. And when the case went to trial, Pike wound up with a case of amnesia, and the case was dismissed, and Gotti walked.
It's funny how that happens.
Yeah,
you know what?
He didn't want any part of it. It was a state charge. So, I mean, I think it happened in Queens or Manhattan. They're not going to put him in witness protection. And, the guy just didn't want his life upended. So, he claimed amnesia, and the case got dismissed.
I'm surprised it even went to court, because, I mean, you would think that Gotti...
Well, they're going to keep pushing. It's funny. If it would have been anyone else, say for argument's sake, you don't want to press charges on somebody for something, they'll bust your balls a little bit, but ultimately they'll say, all right, and that'll be it. They went forward with that because of who John Gotti was, and they got embarrassed because the guy was not gonna give them what they wanted, and they looked foolish.
Yeah. Okay. Well, dude, there's I want to live or I want to do the right thing.
Exactly.
I mean, like, seriously, these people know who I am. They know who my family is. Right. I want to live, so go fuck yourself. I'll just go to jail. Whatever you want to do to me, I'd rather live.
So in 1986, Gotti and 6 other family members were charged under the RICO Act, which racketeer influenced corrupt organization. It was street level stuff: loan sharking, gambling, hijacking, etc. But all of these charges, if he was found guilty on all of them, he could go down for 40 years if convicted.
Dude, see, that's why I love the RICO Act, dude, because all you got to do is bust one street little punk, right? And get him to rat out the whole organization. You got this guy, now you can charge everybody.
Right.
And that's what's great about RICO, dude. I love.
So he was confident in all the interviews that
anyway, I digress again. Sorry.
They were going to win. And in March of 87, he was acquitted because Sammy Gravano knew of a juror that he could get to, and Gotti authorized Gravano to pay him $60,000, and worst case scenario, they'd get a hung jury. But this guy went above and beyond. He convinced the rest of the jurors that the case was too thin, and that Gotti and his guys, there's no way that we're going to get a conviction here. So instead of a hung jury, he's found not guilty on all charges. That's money well spent.
Oh yeah,
they fixed a couple of cases like that.
Oh yeah, he does it again later in my notes. He does it again. In 1989, there was a Gambino crime family associate, Louis DeBono. He was successful in construction, and he'd even helped build he was instrumental in building the World Trade Center.
That's kind of neat.
he mysteriously disappeared, and informants called the FBI with a tip saying that he was dead and left in a very public place, and that finding him shouldn't be a problem. His body was found at a World Trade Center parking lot. He was in his car, and he had been dead for 2 days. And De Bono was a lesson.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Gotti had him whacked to say that if you don't do the right things, there'd be fatal consequences.
I think he was, if we're talking about the same guy, Gotti called him in to go over something with him, and I guess the guy
he blew him off.
Yeah, but I guess he got spooked. Maybe he thought he was going to get killed, and ultimately what he wound up doing was pissing Gotti off, and they were looking for him for a while, and I think it was on one of Sammy Gravano's podcasts. He ran into somebody, and he just brought the guy's name up, and he goes, "Oh yeah, he's over in his office in the World Trade Center." And Sammy passed that information on to Gotti, who sent a crew of guys. And that lower concourse parking lot in the World Trade Center. I mean, in '93, that's where the guy Al Qaeda operatives tried to knock down the World Trade Center the first time. They put a U-boat down there with a fertilizer bomb, but it just blew a hole lower into the concourse, and they were able to repair it and go on with their lives. But yeah, people don't realize that there was a tremendous underground parking lot in those buildings.
Okay, well, I'm glad you clarified that it was. I didn't even make the connection that it was underneath. I just assumed, I was thinking like parking lot on the side of the building. But there's not enough room on the sides of buildings for parking lots. That's why they have to be underground, right?
Yeah, no, there was a big facility there.
Well, that's why his story earlier was like, oh, he was double parked. That means like, all right, in New York, and this is my, how do I say it? How I visualize the situation, because I've never been there and I've never had to like double park on the street. But basically, like in New York, like you go to like a shop, right? Boom, you pull in, you park on, and then the next guy parks right next to you, but on the road. That is double parking, right?
Well, yeah, because in New York, people park on the street. There's parking meters, right? You get a spot on the sidewalk, but there is, I mean, especially in like where I grew up and in like the outer boroughs, I mean, there's just no place to park. So what people will do is usually you bring a friend, one person sits in the car, the other person double parks and runs into a store. I mean, and before crime really got bad, it was nothing to see people with their cars double parked and running. Because what happens is in New York, in addition to the cops that'll give you a double parking ticket, they have the traffic enforcement agents, or we call them meter maids, and they just roll up behind you and start banging you. And those tickets are expensive. I mean, probably now, I mean, when I was a cop, they were like $60-$70 for a double parking ticket. God only knows what they are now. So yeah, parking is very tight in New York.
Yeah. But yeah, the whole, that's, it's, I don't know, for some reason my mind went to what was just happening, and then you talked about the double parking thing, and was just like, yeah, dude, it's like you park on the road, and then people behind you are just sitting there honking their horn, and you're like, like, why aren't you moving? Anyway.
I drive a truck.
Anyway,
I drive 18-wheelers, and I've driven through New York City on 995 and other highways going in and out of there, but I couldn't imagine having to make a delivery in Manhattan. God, that would be
It happens all the time. The big supermarkets. It's a big rig.
Oh, I know, but I can just it's got to be a nightmare. But
it is. It is.
So.
I would imagine. Anyway, not the point.
So, in 1990, John O'Connor, he was a New York City union leader. He crossed paths with the Gambino family on a construction deal, and as a result, O'Connor was shot multiple times. He did survive, but Gotti was charged with the hit. O'Connor was subpoenaed by Gotti's attorney to testify for the defense.
Well, they knew he wasn't going to. He knew where it came from, and he wasn't going to play ball with them, with the prosecution.
So he said that he never talked to Gotti, and he had no idea who it was who had shot him. So Gotti was found not guilty on this case, and it embarrassed the government. This should have been a slam dunk attempted murder, but it blew up in their faces. And Gotti had gotten to O'Connor either by threat or bribe. And this was when Gotti earned the name the Teflon Don. Yeah. And in this case, not on top of getting to O'Connor, they had also gotten to another juror with a bribe. So,
dude, dollar bills make the world go around, man.
So when he came out, he was met by thousands of people who cheered for him. The tabloids loved him too, and he loved the attention. And the press was an unwitting ally, and they were propping him up.
That was two.
They were propping him up in the public opinion, of the people. So this benefits Gotti for that, but it also benefits the press because Gotti sold newspapers and he got TV ratings. So
yeah,
Gotti was known to just flip cash to homeless people on the street on camera, of course.
Of course.
And he would fund block parties like all the time, so he was basically, as far as the people were concerned, he was Robin Hood.
Dude, where was I during this? Wait, when was this going on? I was probably like 10. Late 80s. Oh, late 80s? Dude, I was 18.
But the feds were getting pissed, and Gotti became, public enemy number one. They knew positively that Gotti had been directly involved in 5 murders that they knew of, and the feds were positive that there was more.
Of course.
But all it took for you to get on Gotti's radar, which is never a good thing, was to disagree with him. Or better yet, let him think that you disagree with him. Robert DiBernardo was a very good moneymaker for the Gambinos, and he made and distributed porn. He was well respected within the Gambino family, but word got to Gotti that DiBernardo was being disloyal and disrespectful behind Gotti's back. So Gotti put a hit out on him, and Sammy Gravano even tried to talk him out of it, but Gotti wouldn't budge. So DiBernardo came to a meeting in Sammy's office. He offers DiBernardo a cup of coffee, and as he's making the cup, a gunner came up from behind and shot DiBernardo in the back of the head, and the body was never found.
It's under fucking Giant Stadium with Jimmy Hoffa.
Well, I mean, sometimes they'll bury guys, or sometimes they'll have family, or they own a funeral home where, crematory, they'll burn them up, or they'll put them out, take them out on a boat, gun them, and dump them out at sea.
Dexter, yes, sir. And actually, what you just said right there was how Bill says I just broke the case that we were talking about, but my dude, all right, this guy is murdering people, and his family owns a cemetery, and they couldn't find any of the bodies. Well,
he's talking about episode 26 with Larry Hall.
I wonder where the bodies are. His family owns a cemetery. Like,
they're buried on top of graves.
Yeah. How hard is it to either throw another body in a coffin with somebody when it's not an open casket thing, or do this or do that? I'm like, dude, all the bodies are buried in his, and then when you were, that just made me think, when you were saying that, it made me think of that. Anyway, moving on. # I digress.
So the feds were trying everything to get Gotti, but he was always one step ahead of them. And this is just a random thought from me, but maybe he had somebody within the organization on the payroll. Maybe.
You think?
No, not the federal government.
No. Okay. I was just wondering. I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, Bill. This was like 30 years ago. This is not today. If it was today, it'd be a different story.
There was a guy. He was an ex-NYPD cop. He was a detective, but he was retired, or he had become a private investigator. And I know he had gotten arrested for being involved with something with Gotti. But as far as like active NYPD guys being involved, I mean, that was the Lucchese's more with the Mafia cops, Caracappa and Ippolito, and that was a warring faction with Gotti, because Gaspipe was basically trying to have Gotti killed.
All right, right on.
But the feds needed quality evidence, and soon a way to get it presented itself. In 1988, Gotti bought the Ravenite Social Club in Little Italy, and this became his base of operations where he would hold his meetings. And so the feds, they rented a nearby apartment where they got the video surveillance of Gotti and his top brass regularly coming and going from the Ravenite. So they were going to, excuse me.
Well, so the way they got him is upstairs from the Ravenite, there was a former Gambino guy that had died, but his widow kept the apartment above the Ravenite. And you could go out the back of the Ravenite, and there was a staircase that went upstairs. So what Gotti would do is, Gotti had a habit of having everybody come visit him at the club. What he would do is he would walk guys upstairs. He would give this woman $100 to get lost for an hour, and then they would have high-level meetings. Because he knew downstairs in the social club it was bugged. So they felt safe because this woman's husband was a former mob guy, and now he's deceased, and nobody. But what happened was, through informants, they said, well, he's always going through the back and he's going upstairs. So the FBI was able to figure out that this woman, whose husband was a player at one time, is deceased. They put two and two together, and through wiretaps on her, they realized she was going, because she never left the apartment. I think that the one time that she left the apartment for a couple hours, or she went away for a weekend or a short trip, they were able to go into her apartment, bug it, and that's how they catch Gotti. I think Chico's on one of those wiretaps. I know Frank Lacasio's on those wiretaps. I don't think Sammy was, but just Gotti being Gotti, talking about, what he wants to, I think one of those tapes he's talking about, I'll sever this guy's head. And, he's actually talking about the inner workings of the mob, which basically sealed his fate because, it's one thing to have someone say you did something, but if they've got you on tape talking about it, how are you going to repute your own words? And basically that's everything came down on him. That next case, based on those tapes that were made up in that apartment on, I think it was Mulberry Street in the Ravenite upstairs, is basically what sealed his doom.
Yep. And,
dude, I love the name of that club though, dude. The Ravenite, dude. It sounds like some sounds
like a metal club, a goth
sounds
metal club.
like some new wave goth metal club or something, dude. I love the name of that club. It probably was nothing like that.
No, but they had to sit on this evidence for a bit though, because they wanted a time where all of the brass would be there at the same time so they could get them all with one quick swoop. And that happened after a while. Gravano had left town. It was a plan because this Gotti knew that the feds were getting close. So it's just like, okay, we want you out of town. So, so that if I get caught, you can step in and run things and they won't get you. So, so Gravano left town, but he came back before he was supposed to because he missed his family. And,
he was ordered back. If you listen to Sammy's, because he didn't get caught going to see his family. He got caught.
He got caught at the Raven.
At a meeting, and that's where they grabbed him, Lacasio, and Gotti. DeChico had already been killed. Gotti, for whatever reason, I don't know, didn't think maybe he jumped the gun. Maybe the indictments weren't coming as quickly, or maybe he really thought that he needed a high level meeting. But because Sammy, I think, was in Pennsylvania or upstate New York somewhere. He had grown a beard, trying to change his appearance, and then he was called back. That's how they were able to grab everybody in one fell swoop.
But he didn't. But Gravano didn't want. He's like, when he said, "Okay, come to the Ravenite," Gravano's like, "They're watching the Ravenite."
Right. What was the purpose of me being in hiding all that time? Right.
Right. If you're just going to have me come to the place where they're watching everything that we do, and we're all going to be in the same place, but. Sammy was loyal at that time. At that time he was loyal, so he did what he was told. So, so when as soon the other brass was already there, Sammy was the last to arrive, and when he got there, they pounced. They got Sammy right as he was walking into the place, and then they swarmed the inside of the building, and Gotti, they're just sitting there at this point. They hadn't gone upstairs yet. But at this point, they're sitting there at a table, and Gotti just says, with this shit-eating grin on his face, he's like, "Hey, we need to be seeing you eventually. Can we at least finish our coffee?" So one FBI agent said, "Sure, go ahead. We'll wait. We'll be going home. You won't be."
Wow.
So after that, the arrests were made, and they were going to try to put all of them away for life. So Gotti, Gravano, and a couple others that Vic has already mentioned, they were indicted for charges from racketeering to murder, including the hit on Paul Castellano, which had come out in the tapes. The press and the public, everybody was eating it up, and they were rooting for Gotti to beat another charge. But in pretrial hearings, the audio tapes were played, and up until that point, the media and the feds believed that Gravano and Gotti were close friends and partners. But these tapes proved otherwise, because you'd often hear Gotti talking shit about Gravano in his absence. So you want to elaborate on that a little bit, Vic?
There's two sides of that story. I mean, Sammy's side is, Sammy says that John had come to him after they were arrested and said, "Listen, I need you to take the fall. I need to be in the street. I need to be running the family. I want you to take the fall." And Sammy looked at it he was talking like that maybe he was looking to get him killed and trying to garner support. And then there's other mobsters in that family that say, "No, Sammy's making this whole thing up." Again, I don't know. The truth is somewhere in the middle. But from whatever happened, him and Sammy had a falling out, and Sammy decided to cooperate, and the rest is history. John went down. The rest of his life, he died of cancer in a federal prison, and Sammy got I think like 5 years of everything, and then he got out, and then Sammy got jammed up again in early 2000 in that ecstasy case, and now he's out and looks like he turned his life around, and he's got a podcast, and he's making money legitimately, and he served his time. I mean, you can't keep somebody in jail forever,
Right.
So it is what it is.
Exactly. Yeah, no, totally. Because we talked about this last week. It's like, dude, he did his time.
He did his time. He served his debt to society. Who cares what he did? I mean, that's what he got sentenced to.
I mean, you just
served his time, and he should be a free man. I mean, seriously.
Vic, you pretty much did the short version of the rest of the story. So let's go ahead and wrap it up.
Yeah,
and I managed to get a Spaceballs reference into this one. Hell yeah,
you did.
But he, I mean, there's a couple other, just little things and everything. When Gotti was convicted, found guilty, one of the FBI agents said that the Teflon was gone, Gotti was covered with Velcro, and all of these charges stuck.
Yep.
So, he was sent to a maximum security prison in Marion, Illinois.
For white boys? Sorry, dude. You started that a little bit ago, and I'm never going to let that one go.
But this is one of the toughest prisons in the country. It's actually, Todd, it's the one that Joseph Paul Franklin was so terrified of being sent to.
Oh. But why? Because it was for white boys?
Well, no, Marion is a maximum. It's an older facility. And before they built ADX Florence out in Colorado, the Supermax, that's where they sent, people that they didn't, to restrict their movement. If they screwed up, they had a really bad shoe or solitary confinement. Yep. So in its time, Marion was considered the worst or the most secure of all federal prisons before they built ADX Florence out in Colorado.
So, dude, Colorado, the entire state of Colorado should be a fenced-in prison.
So,
just saying. I mean, dude, it's like the flattest state. Well, okay.
No, it's not. Fucking Rocky Mountains, man. You're thinking of Kansas.
Kansas, Colorado. What's the fucking difference?
Mountains.
All right. No, dude. No, actually, never mind. I digress.
Nebraska. But, on June 10th of 2002, John Gotti died of cancer. The Catholic Church denied him of a funeral mass, but his family carried on with the funeral of his own. He was put in a gold casket, and his funeral was a circus with hundreds of vehicles in the procession. People lining the streets for a view. People from, members of the other four crime families, as well as the Gambino family. They all attended. And he was put in a mausoleum in Queens next to his son, Frankie. And so, but when the chips fell, people began to admit that Gotti was the most famous mob boss, but he was also one of the most incompetent as well. and after Gravano's defection, quite a few other higher ups began coming forward, likely because they wanted out and they figured they could get a deal. But John Gotti's arrogance and incompetence brought brought down the Mafia's empire. It still exists, but it's a shell of what it once was.
And by you mean Gravano's whatever, you mean like, so Gravano turned rat, so everybody turned rat?
Pretty much, yeah.
Dude, no, dude. You don't
it's not that. It's again,
bitches get stitches.
It's the sentencing guidelines. People, you got to realize something. The federal system is different than going to jail in state.
I know.
The federal government has way more resources to go after you.
Oh, yeah.
And once you're sentenced, so say for argument's sake, you live in New York and you get convicted of a federal crime. Well, you're not going to serve your jail time. I mean, it would suck enough to serve your jail time in the New York State prison system, but the furthest it can ship you is 400 miles. If you get convicted of a crime federally in New York, you could wind up in California or Texas or Big Sandy down in, I think Big Sandy is in Kentucky. I mean, there's just so many federal prisons, and they're in the middle of nowhere. There's no place really for your relatives to stay. They make it a pain in the ass for you. So guys don't want, you know what I mean? It's like people will just forget about you. It's like you cease to exist. So that's enough. And again, the sentencing guidelines are so severe that no one really, wants to do time anymore. It's not like the old days. Plus, the federal system used to be considered club fed. Nowadays, you have all the cartel guys and like really dangerous people in the federal prison system now. It's not, like in the old days where they'd send you to Danbury, you were playing tennis or learning gardening. I mean, some of these places are hellholes in the middle of nowhere.
Or slicing garlic with a razor blade.
Yeah, slicing garlic with a razor blade to make it so thin. It was so delicious.
But yeah, but the one thing that I said earlier is just like, okay, when they went from one extreme to the other as far as bosses were concerned, they went from one bad boss who was he was effective, but he was still a bad boss in Castellano, to a guy that was 10 times worse, not effective. And,
I think he was effective. I mean,
no, he did what he wanted.
He just brought a lot of heat. You got to realize something. The federal government, Gotti took that position at the wrong time, because that's when the federal government was putting a lot of money and resources into going after the mob. You got to remember, J. Edgar Hoover used to ignore the mob, right? J. Edgar Hoover dies in the 70s. There's turmoil in the FBI. They're going through different directors. And then they finally figure out that RICO law, which was originally written to go after corporations, can be used as the mafia, because the mafia is a corporation.
It is.
Right. So Gotti kind of if John Gotti was John Gotti before during J. Edgar Hoover, he probably would have been just like Capone. Like, they would have gotten him eventually, but I think he just kind of stepped into that role at the wrong time. The federal government was like really taking organized crime seriously. They had all the tools, right? They were ready for him. I mean, they had just knocked down all the other bosses, right, with the commission case and the pizza connection case. So he just kind of stepped in at the wrong time. Did he make it easy for him? Yeah, in a lot of ways he did, but I don't think he was as incompetent as everybody thinks he was. I mean, did he make mistakes? Yeah, but every CEO or business guy does.
Right.
Everybody makes a mistake. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, see, dude, I love hearing Vic's opinion on it because, like, when you look up shit on the internet, dude, you get like, this is what it was. I'm like, no, dude, I want to talk to somebody that was there or kind of
I wasn't
there.
You know,
I know, but you know what I mean, though. But I'd rather talk to somebody like you and like fill in the details because, like Bill said, well, you just brought us to the end, which is cool because you threw in so many details that probably weren't in Bill's notes.
And you did it a hell of a lot faster than I would have.
Yeah. Dude, it made it. All right. This is awesome. Okay, let's go. All right. Anyway, I digressed again. Not really, but still.
So, do you have anything more on this, Vic?
Yeah.
I mean,
Please.
I mean,
I don't.
When I was a detective, I mean, I worked in auto theft. I operated out of a satellite office in the Bronx. Most of the organized crime cases involving the 5 families were in Brooklyn and Queens because you had a lot of the families that were involved in junkyards, salvage yards. So our Queens and Brooklyn guys did a lot of mafia cases where we would get brought into later. Sometimes they would use us for surveillance because nobody knew who the hell we were. We were up in the Bronx. A lot of these mob guys didn't know who we were. We were like ghosts, you know, when we would show up. Dealt with some of the guys, some of the boys from way back when. I had a wonderful 20-year career with the New York City Police Department, and it's enabled me to start a second career, you know, writing books, and you know, I get to meet people and go on podcasts, and you know, it's I've come full circle. I get to live vicariously through myself with my books.
And thank you for joining us, so we can live vicariously through your stories as well. Because
Absolutely.
Damn, dude, you made that story so much more interesting than just the internet facts that Bill was going to spout.
No, it's good.
And cool. Dude, don't get me, I mean, and don't get me wrong, dude. I mean, I love our podcast, whatever, but it's always nice to have, like, you know, you come on or someone that was.
Well, I can provide historical content.
Yes, exactly. Right. I mean, you could tell us how it really was. Not what we could find on the internet. You know what I mean? And dude, and I appreciate that. And dude, you made this one so much better. Like even the stuff that we double covered from the last episode, when you chimed in, I was like, all right, here we go. We're going to have a good time now. Because Vic's talking about stuff that he knows. I mean, this is how it was. And I love that. So thank you again for joining us.
No, can I plug my
so much.
Yes, go ahead and plug your book,
please.
plug your podcast.
Plug everything. Actually, send me all the information because when I edit this video down and put on YouTube, I'll make a thing that goes across the bottom with all your
I appreciate
on
that. Yeah, so just go to the Amazon book section, type in my name, Vic, Ferrari, like a car. All my books will come up. They're $10 paperback, $2.99 ebook download. And my podcast is actually named after my book, NYPD Through the Looking Glass, and our retired NYPD members, and we talk about, you know, our days and on patrol and organized crime, and I get to bring in guys from different units that can talk about the different things. Oh, thank you. And the podcast now, it's on Spotify and iTunes and everything else. Be sure to check it out.
All right, hell yeah, dude.
Yeah, I listened. I mean, there's only one episode on it so far, and I listened to it. It's about. Was it? You put a new one up?
Yeah, I got an introduction one, and then I interviewed a guy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the Police Academy one. That was really. I don't like that one.
You listened to it?
Yeah, that was a really good. That was a really good story. I was entertained. You got a good thing going there. You definitely do.
Yeah, who knew, right?
So,
yeah, dude, you're talking to the ultimate who knew guy right here. Because dude, Bill said it, dude, we have like how many? What do we have now?
What
was it like on we have 990 subscribers or something
on Twitter. Yeah.
On Twitter. Yeah, dude. I never would have thought that. Dude, Bill showed me that. I'm like, what? Wow.
I gotta run. I gotta take my dog out and I gotta eat.
All right, brother.
Okay, well, thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so
coming
much for
on. That
joining
was
us.
awesome.
Guys, thank you so
far-
much. When this is up, just please send me the links and I'll promote it on my end.
I will,
Okay,
dude.
it'll go up Saturday. It'll go up Saturday.
Excellent. Okay, guys, have a good weekend.
All right, brother. You too.
You too. Thanks
Bye-bye.
again,
Thanks,
brother.
Vic. Thank you so much.
Bye.
So anyway, check out our stuff on social media, our links, our Twitter, our Facebook, and everything. Interact with us. We'll give you a shout out, and we'll, great time with that one. I loved it.
Oh yeah, dude, that was so much fun.
Yeah, and yeah, if you like us, tell a friend. If you hate us, tell an enemy, and just rate, review, and all that good stuff, and blah 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 blah. Until next week. Later.
Cheers, everybody.